The Chicago Cubs. Second half of the season, post All-Star break. I have a litany. I have a Christmas list in the summer of what I would like to see from the Chicago Cubs, what I think it's going to take for them to not only just play in October, but have success in October. And I am going to make, at the All-Star break, my season prediction for what happens to these Chicago Cubs. First things first, let's get some of the context out of the way. Incredibly fun, exciting first half of baseball on the north side for the Chicago Cubs. A Chicago Cubs team that put up back-to-back 83-win seasons. That first 83-win season with David Ross, they got super hot in late July and August, right around this time, petered off in September, couldn't make the playoffs. Last year's team was simply just a frustrating mess. So coming into this year, Jed Hoyer, we all know it, job on the line, out of contract, end of this season, had to make some moves. And to this point, a lot of the moves that he's made have turned to magic. At this point right now, we do not know whether the Chicago Cubs are going to make the playoffs or not, but as it stands in this moment right now, Jed Hoyer deserves an extension with the Chicago Cubs. There's no two ways about it. He went out and made the trade for Kyle Tucker. He went out and found, on an incredibly affordable deal, Matthew Boyd on a 2-year deal after he shined for the Cleveland Guardians in the playoffs last year. And to his credit, he went out and found some pieces that have reshaped, remade, and turned this bullpen into a quality unit heading into the second half of the year. Now, does he get brownie points for the way Daniel Palencia has pitched? Yes. I mean, in theory, he was a part of that trade, but Daniel Palencia coming along, racking up 11 saves in the first half of the year, wasn't really on anyone's bingo card, and that's okay. And I don't think it was on Jed Hoyer's either. Was it on Jed Hoyer's bingo card that PCA would be starting in center field and mic'd up during the All-Star game? No, I don't think so either. But at the same time, he deserves a lot of credit. Now, with Jed Hoyer moving forward, big questions loom and remain. I guess you're already thinking about them in your head. The first one is, can he get Kyle Tucker re-signed at the end of the year? And how far and how successful can this iteration, this unit, this team go? And the final one, which we will get to, can Jed Hoyer add on to this team? Pitching, offense, bullpen, whatever. Can he add on with multiple pieces that can hopefully take this team over the top and compete in an incredibly deep National League? First things first, though, let's get the stuff out of the way. Chicago Cubs right now sitting in first place, 57-39 record, .594 winning percentage. That is only 4 percentage points behind the Los Angeles Dodgers for best record in the National League. It's been a charmed, great first half of the season for the Cubs, and yet they start the second half only one game above the Milwaukee Brewers in the National League Central. Those Brewers, they simply won't go away. Cubs 30-16 at home, 27-23 on the road. Very respectable number there. Run differential, by far the best in the National League at plus 119. They're also second in the National League in runs scored. So winning 2 of 3 against the Yankees heading into the All-Star break was actually pretty huge for the Chicago Cubs because of all the goodwill and all the great feelings that we've been having as Cubs fans heading into the All-Star break. It wouldn't have felt great if the Chicago Cubs were either tied or in second place in the National League Central after leading it for most of this year. So before I get too much deeper into the Cubs, I have to tell Cubs fans something right now, and this is going to pain you to hear this, and it pains me to say it. The Milwaukee Brewers aren't going anywhere. The Milwaukee Brewers are going to be that thorn in the side and perhaps that elixir that turns this Cubs season into a pumpkin if they're not too careful. The Milwaukee Brewers, out of nowhere, well, for the last 44 games, Milwaukee Brewers are 31-12. Milwaukee Brewers, since the Cubs game got rained out on June 18th, are 16-5. So the Cubs, look, the Cubs have been playing .500 baseball for about a month now. They got off to a great start to begin the year, gave themselves a nice little bit of a padding. You are going to have stretches where you play .500 ball. And during that time, Milwaukee Brewers have been able to crawl back into it. And how have they done it? Well, the important thing to keep in mind is that if you look at it here, over the last month, over the last 30 days, they've had 4 players that are hitting over 300. They have, over the last 2 weeks, they have 5 players hitting over 300. And over the last 6 or 7 games, they have 6 players hitting well over 300 because of a guy named Andrew Vaughn, who suddenly seems resurrected and rejuvenated in Milwaukee, is hitting the cover off the baseball. I will tell you, I'm not getting ahead of my skis on that one with Andrew Vaughn, that suddenly he's going to turn into a monster. Let's see if he comes back to earth just a little bit. But hey, if you look at it, Brandon Terang hitting 316 over the last 30 days. Sal Frelick, 306 over the last 30 days. Kristen Yelich, 330 over the last 30 days. Last 15 games, Jackson Chourio, by far their most talented offensive player. He will be heard from in the second half, hitting over 300 the last 15 games. And then, of course, through 5 games with Andrew Vaughn, he already has a 0.4 WAR, which is almost the same amount that he's gotten over the last 2 seasons, over the last week. He had a minus 1.8 WAR for the White Sox this year, already a 0.4 for the Brewers. Easy way to do that, drive in 11 runs in 5 games and hit 429. The other guy who's been incredibly interesting is their third baseman, Caleb Durbin. Caleb Durbin, over his last 78 at-bats, 919 OPS, 1.9 WAR, hitting 372 over those 78 at-bats. Look, I'm not trying to turn this into a Brewers podcast. I'm just trying to inform you, Cubs fan, who doesn't get the opportunity to watch a lot of Brewers games. Why would you? That would feel gross. That the Brewers are here to stay. And we all know about Freddie Peralta leading that rotation. That is a strong top-of-the-end rotation arm. We've all heard about Jacob Misiorowski, 4-1 in his first 5 starts, already on the All-Star team. He's already thrown 89 pitches over 100 miles an hour this year. But there's a third piece now, and he is an old head. And he is healthy for them. Brandon Woodruff. In his last start, he recorded 13 outs. 10 of them were strikeouts. He has 18 strikeouts through 10 1/3 innings. He may not be exactly back to form of the Brandon Woodruff that we've seen of years past, but the dude looks healthy. So that's now 3 guys in the rotation that you have to compete with. Jose Quintana got up to a strong start. He's kind of leveled off a little bit. He's solid, but he's definitely beatable. So if you're the Chicago Cubs, look, man, this is not going to be easy. This is not going to be a cakewalk. And what's funny about it is that in a lot of major categories, the Chicago Cubs continue to dominate. Again, when I mentioned run differential, by far the best in the National League. The Cubs at 119. In second place, the Brewers, 81. Third place, Dodgers, 69. Phillies, 63. Followed by the Mets at 45. Most runs scored in the National League. Dodgers 518, but Cubs right behind them with 512. But who's right behind them? The Milwaukee Brewers at 457. 438 for Philadelphia, 426 for the New York Mets. You're starting to see a pattern here of who the players are in the National League, who the pretenders are and who the contenders are. And as of right now, the contenders are the Chicago Cubs, the Los Angeles Dodgers, the Philadelphia Phillies, the New York Mets, and oh yeah, the Milwaukee Brewers. The Padres might try and make some noise. The Braves might also try and make some noise. But those are the teams right now to look at heading into the second half. And the Chicago Cubs have a great opportunity to take advantage of the great pad that they've built by winning some games early on and take that into a strong second half. So what are the keys? What are my X factors to a strong second half for the Chicago Cubs? Let's go number 1 on my list right here. It's not number 1 in power ranking, but I do think it's the first thing that you need to look at and say to yourself, I feel pretty good about the Cubs, and I think we got ourselves a chance. We've got a great schedule. Chicago Cubs have a top 3 easiest schedule in Major League Baseball the rest of the way through. Of course, things changed a little bit, but at this point right now, we kind of know who most of these teams are as we move forward. The rest of July shapes up like this. Now, the rest of July is going to be some formidable opponents and some games where you're going to have to play well. They host the Boston Red Sox for 3 games. They host the Kansas City Royals for 3 games. They go to the White Sox to Sox Park for 3 over the weekend, and then they open up a huge series against the Brewers. Red Sox have won 10 in a row. That's going to be a tough matchup. They're going to try and come out of the gate firing. Kansas City Royals have been under 500 this year, but man, they have some talented hitters in that lineup. And don't tell me for a second right now, we have everything figured out in the Chicago Cubs rotation. White Sox, again, just like the last series, I think you got to look at that as a sweep or bust because that sets up a huge series, a bit of an aperitif, if you will, with the Brewers in Milwaukee to close out July. And then in August, this is where the Chicago Cubs can make their moves. And all these X factors that I'm going to bring up, all these things that I want to see, or the things that I want to predict about this Cubs team moving forward, a lot of it is going to boil down to what happens in this month of August. They host the Baltimore Orioles for 3 games. They host the Reds for 3 games. Let's be honest here. The Baltimore Orioles are not the team of past years. Their pitching is not very good. These games are at Wrigley Field. They need and should play well in that series. They then go to St. Louis, at the Blue Jays, home for 3 games against the Pirates, home for 4 games against the Brewers, then at the Angels, at the Giants, at the Rockies. So just on its face right there, Pirates, Angels, Rockies. We got 3 teams that are bottom feeders in Major League Baseball. Those are 9 games right there that you need to take care of business. Chicago Cubs have shown themselves that they've been able to play well against St. Louis up to this point. Got a little Red Brewers in there. And, of course, the Blue Jays and Giants. Not really sure where those 2 teams are going to be. The Blue Jays have, again, been another team that has had a miraculous turnaround that now has them in position atop the AL Central. The AL East, excuse me. In August, they might be a team that's buying. They might have some new additions on that team. So I get it. You've got a couple series there that maybe make you crick an eyebrow up a little bit that you have to play well, but there are plenty of feastable matchups in August that the Chicago Cubs should be able to take care of. And when we talk about playing 500 ball right now, they need to be above 500 in August if they're going to have a real chance at not only just locking down the AL Central, but getting that feel-good vibe heading into September that this is not only just a playoff team, but maybe a playoff team that can compete for the pennant. Moving into September, they host the Braves at home for 3, Nationals at home for 3, go on the road and play the Braves in Atlanta for 3. What is it about playing the Cubs in Atlanta where bad things happen? I'm not trying to manifest. I'm just throwing it out there right now. They come back. They host the Rays for 3. They go to the Pirates for 3, go to the Reds for 4, home for the Mets for 3, and then finish up the season with the Cardinals for 3. Again, very doable schedule. Nationals, bottom of their division. Pirates, bottom of their division. Reds, not a great team. Rays, who knows what's going to happen with them? They've been competitive so far, but that AL East is so deep right now. I do personally like the Blue Jays, the Yankees, and the Red Sox ahead of the Rays at this time. So it's sitting out there right now where they play a lot of teams that are going to have a lot of games under 500, and there's a little bit of a TCB, take care of business attitude that the Chicago Cubs need to take over the final 2 months of the season. My next major X factor for the Chicago Cubs, and this is one I've been talking about ad nauseum, you and your friends have been talking about ad nauseum, and we are waiting with bated breath to open up some presents on Christmas morning of what did Jed Hoyer get us at the deadline. I will say that I'm not positive right now who those players are going to be. There was a report. Now look, last week on the show, I tried to temper expectations by telling people that don't be surprised if some of these teams decide to not sell because they are still relatively in it. With that second wild card, it has created more of, not quite parity, but more of an illusion that if you're only 5 games out of the second wild card, ownership, fans, they demand that you stand put and keep some of your guys. I didn't know who those teams were going to be, and I still don't think we're going to know. I think it's going to be 7 to 10 days before we really start to get a sense of who's going to be selling and which buyers are going to be able to work with them to find a deal that makes sense. The latest one since my last taping was that Jesse Rogers of ESPN and ESPN 1000 reported that as it stands right now, the Diamondbacks now are leaning closer to selling. That they might be unloading a Merrill Kelly, a Zach Gallen, an Eugenio Suarez. Any of those players, any of those pieces, I think can help the Chicago Cubs tremendously heading into the final 2 months of the year. So as it stands right now, the meter is on sell for the Diamondbacks. We'll see what happens. They go out, they win 8 in a row. Who knows what can possibly change? But if terms of acquisitions, I'm not exactly sure who specifically the players are going to be for Jed Hoyer, but I will give you a number. And let's just say if the number is over 2.5 players acquired for Jed Hoyer, I'm going over on that one. I think you're going to see at least 3 players acquired at the deadline for Jed Hoyer to hopefully revamp and also hopefully push this team over the edge moving forward. If you put that number in Vegas at 3, a flat 3, and going over on that, I'm not so sure about that necessarily. But I do feel very confident that 2 pitchers and possibly 1 offensive player, 1 bat, could be coming to Chicago by the end of the month. The one that was floated out there recently, if you haven't gotten an opportunity to hear, but that's why you're here, listening to Sports Talk Chicago with Joey Christopoulos right here on WLS AM 890 on a Saturday night. One of the recent reports was that someone has kicked around the idea of starting pitcher Mitch Keller on the Pittsburgh Pirates, their closer David Bednar, and their third baseman Brian Hayes could possibly be in a mega package coming back to the Cubs with prospects possibly Brent Brown and others heading back there, Owen Casey as well. I will tell you, I like Mitch Keller a lot. I think Mitch Keller is a solid pitcher. And I think he's been hidden in some ways playing on a bad Pirates team the last couple of years. Keep in mind, Paul Skeens just started the All-Star game with a record of 4-8. Mitch Keller at one point this season was 1-9. That is the 1-loss record. Again, not indicative of the pitcher. Easy correlation to bad baseball team. I think Mitch Keller, I'm not telling you he's an ace. And I'm not telling you he's starting game 1. He might not even be able or qualified, in my opinion, to start a game 2 for the Cubs right now if Shota Imanaga and Matthew Boyd continue to pitch the way that they have and Shota's track record suggests. But Mitch Keller would be a great number 3, and he would definitely be a guy that could help us out tremendously. He's also signed at a very, very reasonable contract into next year. David Bednar, the closer, look, he's been a guy who's been much maligned in Pittsburgh. He has great stuff. He hasn't always been able to harness it consistently. This season, though, he's got the harnessing and he's got the consistent down pretty good. He would be a very, very, very attractive acquisition, in my opinion, for the Chicago Cubs. Because, again, if you're not going to be able to fill out all of your starting rotation, you have to start thinking about this from an October perspective and not getting ahead of yourself and saying, oh, we're automatically going to make it. But start planning and start thinking about how can you get those final 9 to 12 outs in a baseball game if your pitcher can only go 5 innings. And as it stands right now, they've got some pieces that I like a lot. They've got Presley, Cole Thielbar, Brad Keller, and of course Daniel Palencia. But if you're telling me you can just continue to add to that with quality, I think it gives the Chicago Cubs a leg up to get through the season. If they are a little bit short in the starting rotation, I don't think Javier Assad is going to help us this year. I'm crossing my fingers that Jameson Taillon can come back and help, but calf strain, that's a tough injury for a pitcher. If he could come back for 2 or 3 starts in September, I think that would be a huge plus. So I'm not counting on him. And again, Cade Horton, inning count. What do you do with some of those spots moving forward in these big, huge games? Adding to your bullpen can help shorten the game and get you some of those outs if it isn't necessarily from a starter. My only pushback on this trade is I am not a Ke'Bryan Hayes fan. I used to be a Ke'Bryan Hayes fan. Here's the deal with Ke'Bryan Hayes. 28 years old. Has never been healthy. Has played over 100 games, I think only twice in his career. He had 1 year where he hit about 270, but he's not going to give you a lot of pop. I get it. He's a fantastic defensive player. But at the same time, what he gives you offensively, I think, really isn't that big of a proportional difference than what Matt Shaw is already giving you at the plate. And look, Matt Shaw is not giving you much. The problem with Ke'Bryan Hayes, too, as well, he signed for multiple years. So you're basically locking up your third base position right there. And then it also begs the question, if you're bringing over Ke'Bryan Hayes in this supposed deal, is Matt Shaw in the deal? My thing is this. I'm not buying this trade. I think Mitch Keller and David Bednar are definitely possibles as future Cubs. I think Ke'Bryan Hayes is being tossed in there, probably from the Pittsburgh Pirates side, as a way to maybe sweeten the deal, get his name out there a little bit, maybe get a couple people talking about him positively. Unfortunately, I'm not one of them, because I think Pittsburgh wants to get off of that money. And Pittsburgh doesn't spend a lot of money, but I already think they think that was money poorly spent. I would be shocked if Hayes is involved in this deal. And honestly, I will probably be critical of it, just as critical of it as I am now, if it actually comes to fruition. But that's the hot rumor of the week. Moving forward over the next 7 to 10 days, again, all eyes are going to be on the Arizona Diamondbacks. Eugenio Suarez, with his 31 home runs, who just played in an All-Star game, who made some pretty nice defensive plays, that's the move that you make at third base. That's the guy you go out and get. He will be a free agent. It will probably cost you a nice prospect, but it will not cost you Matt Shaw. That's the move that you try and make right there. So if you're telling me it's Mitch Keller, David Bednar, Eugenio Suarez, sign me up. That gets me my 3. If it's Eugenio Suarez, and then you also maybe try and get that Merrill Kelly from the Diamondbacks, huge win. Also get a Mitch Keller. Now we're talking. This is the type of stuff where Jed Hoyer, he's got himself on the precipice. He is in prime position. He is in the pole position right now of getting that contract extension. It's this deadline deal right here is going to decide whether it pushes it over or not. And sure, there's plenty of other names like Aroldis Chapman, and there could be a name out there that maybe we don't necessarily see. But I will tell you this, I do believe that the Chicago Cubs need to make acquisitions, plural, at the deadline. And if you're putting up the number at 2.5, I'm hitting the over on that one, because I think they need at least 3 pieces right now to hopefully push them over the top, secure the division, and make some noise in the postseason.